Moving in to our last team in the AFC North, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Our narrative for the year is, do you have your future quarterback? You bring in Russ on a dirt cheap contract. You trade for Justin Fields, who is a young quarterback who was put not in a great position, but also I feel like didn't help himself enough to prove that he was worth keeping around. And I think, Dobbs, and tell me if I'm wrong, that the NFL and NFL fans have kind of lauded or lauded's good, right? Or am I just using big vocab?
You know what? Little English check here. Wait, hold on. Yeah, highly praised or admired. Yeah, let's go.
Big vocab mind. Anyway, they've been lauded for bringing in Russ so cheap and Justin for so cheap. Okay, but what if neither of them are the guy going forward? Then you're at square one in a year with a bad quarterback draft. Like, I am not a believer in the Russ train anymore. I far more confident in what Sean Payton can do for an offense than what Arthur Smith can. I do think Arthur Smith will be fine, because I think the responsibilities of a head coach are a lot more than just being an OC. And I think when OCs get turned into head coaches because they have good offenses and then they're not good head coaches, I do feel like going back to that OC role can kind of rejuvenate them. And I'm optimistic for what Arthur Smith can do. I think the Steelers had a really good draft class. I didn't mind their free agency, but I don't know if you have either of these guys are the answer at quarterback, because what if Russ is not playing well? And what if they throw in Justin? Well, you can't put Russ back in. Like, in my opinion, how Russ has operated these last couple years, like, he is top dog.
Well, no, absolutely. And I think this is the thing I want to bring up too, because look, as you were just touching on, you're spot on with this. Here's my issue with the whole thing, right? And I think this is where a lot of Steelers fans are getting super optimistic. And again, I'm not going to fault them. They are being objective, but here's my rebuttal to the whole thing. Because you're hearing a lot of fans at this point say, well, look, right, Art Smith, what he did for Ryan Tannehill, why can't he do the same thing for Russell Wilson? But I think what people aren't realizing is that, at least, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion here, Hunter, it's two completely different situations. Ryan Tannehill never developed into anything until Art Smith, basically, let's be realistic, came into his life, right? Like, Ryan Tannehill basically didn't have any of his NFL talent unlocked. And then in the Art Smith system, it really worked. They shined together. They actually had a very, very productive offense, and it was very fun to watch, right? And it was a very good balance of play action, running the ball. But I think the difference we can agree on is that Russ is not Ryan Tannehill. Russ was having a Hall of Fame caliber career up until he started to fall off, get older, deal with some injuries, and now he's just basically not the same quarterback he used to be. So I don't, and not that he still can't be productive, but let's be real. This Russell Wilson is not the old Russell Wilson. It's not like, oh, he just lost it a little bit and we just got to, fix a few things and he's going to be right back to old Russ. It's like, no, I think this is what happens when Russ is getting older. And it's not. So with Ryan Tannehill, it was like we were literally fixing a project that was never brought to fruition. Well, Russ has already been brought to fruition and has been a really, really amazing quarterback. I think we're on the decline, right?
In that sense, though, Dobbs,
prop up a decline, right?
You could argue that Justin Fields is more like Tannehill than Russ would be.
That's where I was going next. You read my mind. Okay. Is that I think in reality, right? Like we talk about the long-term visions of teams all the time, Hunter. That's the problem. Is that, like you just said, right? If Russ is getting older and Russ is not the guy and he's on a one-year deal, okay, it's not the end of the world. But if Justin Fields is also not the guy, and even let's just throw out another scenario. Let's say Justin, let's just crazy hypotheticals for a second. But it all could happen. Let's say that Russ has a really bad first half of the season. Okay. You bring Justin in. He looks better than he did last year for the Bears. Should say just good enough. Just good enough that you have to lock him in on a few years of the deal. You got to put cap into him, right? But then he's not the guy that's going to bring you Lombardi land. All of a sudden, we're right back into the same position we've been with for the last 3 or 4 years with the Steelers. Like, we have a really good special teams unit. We have a really good defensive unit, but the offense is just not cutting it. And on top of the offense not cutting it, the QB is just not the guy that's going to carry us to the promised land. Now, let's just go to scenario 3. All 3 of them don't, or all 2 of them don't work out. And then we have to go to the draft. Like you just said, as of right now, Carson Beck's the one guy I really have my eye on that I think is going to be a good pro. And again, as the draft process continues, that could completely change. Somebody could completely come and shine. Carson Beck could fall apart. A lot of things could change. But to your point, as of right now, it's a very weak QB class, right? So if Russ and Justin don't work out and you got to move on to the QB class, and all of your star players, as we've talked about with Steelers for so long now, Hunter, as Steelers fans hate us for it, but it's true. You have a core of guys that were the core for so long that are getting old, that are getting to the end of being of playing their best all pro type of football. So all of a sudden, if Russ or Justin isn't the guy, realistically, we're going to hit a point where the Steelers are going to have to rebuild sooner than later. And it's the painful truth that a lot of Steelers fans never want to come to with, because Mike Tomlin's such a good coach, because they have such a strong, amazing pedigree that nobody will ever be able to take away from them. But Steelers fans, I think all I'm trying to lay out is the reality that just maybe you might have to kind of swallow a couple seasons coming up to get back to that same Steelers standard. Because as of right now, I think you'd agree, Hunter, things just feel very limbo state.
Yeah, I mean, my main thing is, okay, if you want to see if Russ or Justin are going to be the guys, right? You essentially both have them on 1-year deals. You trade away Kenny Pickett. Yeah, I think they put together the line pretty well. When it comes to weapons, though, is George Pickens a number 1 alpha receiver? I guess you could argue that, you have Art Smith and, he had all these weapons in Atlanta and definitely didn't use them to their potential. So you have, a guy like Cordero Patterson and even, a Scotty Miller, who I think can be used in a good gadget way. So I think you're in a decent spot on the offense, but it's not like Russ has, a ton of options. It's not like Russ is going to be surrounded by a star-studded cast, and Justin won't either. So I just feel like the best... Okay, this is where I struggle with this too. I guess we have been really heavy on the offense on this one as well, similar to the Browns, but it's the Browns or the Ravens, but all these teams have good defenses. I think...
Well, they'll have great defenses.
Yeah,
that's why it's even
AFC North, yeah.
We're addressing, the reality is that's kind of why it's the problem with the narrative is the defense doesn't even tie into the narrative at all. We know these teams have amazing defenses. I think the offense is the story.
One of the main things that I struggle with is, okay, let's say Russ has a good year. Russell Wilson is 35 years old. What are you going to extend him for 2-3 years? He's not going to take this team to a Super Bowl. It's just not going to happen. So, at least in my opinion, I don't think this is a Super Bowl ready roster.
It's the slimmest of chances, statistically speaking.
Right, anything's possible. But, okay, you extend Russ for 3 years. Then what? I understand you want to stay competitive. And I'm not saying rebuild. I'm not saying anything, really. I don't know what they should do. This is almost an impossible position, especially when you've been in the inevitable 10-7, 9-8, over 500 rule for the last however many years under Tomlin. You're not bad enough to break it down, but you're not good enough to get a win. You haven't gotten I don't think they've gotten a playoff win since 2017?
Well, I was gonna hold on. Just wait 1 sec here.
The Steelers' last playoff win was, let's see.
Yeah,
2016.
2016.
So it's been a while. I don't know. The Steelers are a very intriguing team, and I think they will always be good under Tomlin. I just think he's one of those guys that elevates the team. But I almost feel like you have to take another swing at quarterback this year. Regardless, if Russ gets extended, you have to take a swing at quarterback. And if Justin does, I don't know if... I don't know if Justin is going to. With Justin's agent, I find it very hard to believe he takes like the Daniel Jones contract.
No, and that makes sense too. No, it definitely does. And that's why, like, I'm with you 100% here, Hunter. The problem with this with the Steelers is truly like they are probably the biggest enigma in terms of like how do you go about getting this team back to the promised land in a couple seasons, right? Like every team we can make a long 5-term, 7-year vision. But with the Steelers, it's like I don't know what they're going to do to immediately get back to contention. The only thing is if Russ has a full blown rejuvenation of 7 years ago, 6 years ago. But is that likely? It's not.
In the last 5 years, they have only had a positive point differential once. Once.
That is crazy.
I think point differential is probably, in my opinion, one of the biggest indicators of if you're a good team or not. Like when we were talking about the Ravens and Lamar, they had point differentials where they were like plus 200 by multiple years, and they've been great teams. Where I think in general, like, what year was it when the Steelers started out like 10-0, 11-0, and I was just
I think
like
it was 2021 if I'm not mistaken,
something like that, and I was just like, no, it had to be 2020 because it had to be 2020. But I was just like, this team isn't what it's made out to be. Now, funny enough, that was the year that they had the positive point differential in the last 5. It was 104. But I don't know, just very interesting times in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that to say the least.
So before we wrap up our AFC North video, do you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts is, you know what? The AFC North is definitely just as much of a bloodbath as it's always been. And it's definitely going to be a fun season again to watch how this division unravels. Because if there's one thing about the AFC North that we can agree on, it's that, you know what? We definitely do not know how this division is going to pan out.
Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been our team preview for every team in the AFC North. If you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, let us know in the comments who you think is going to win the AFC North this year, what's your favorite narrative going into the year, and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you so much for watching.